Hello and welcome to Ye Olde Guide. This is our second episode on the city of Liverpool, and this time we're discussing arts and culture. It's a big episode. We'll be covering the incredible musical history of Liverpool, including Merseybeat, and we'll be talking about the football teams, horse racing and art and much more. My name is Liam McGrath, and I'm joined by historian Daniel Gooch, and we're making a series of podcasts about the history and heritage of English towns and cities. This is a mega episode. We've split it into 4 parts, and we hope you enjoyed part 1 of our tour of Liverpool, which told the story of migration, the role of Liverpool in the Second World War, and the turbulent politics of the city. Before we start part 2, just a reminder, you can send us any thoughts or feedback on the episode via our website, yeoldeguide.com, or via Twitter, X @yeoldeguide. We'd love to hear from you, and we're hoping to round up all your comments in the final part of this series of episodes on Liverpool. Well, it's part 2 of our podcast guide to the history of Liverpool, and we are exploring arts and culture in Liverpool, the cultural history of the city. And you know how excited I am about this episode because my favourite band are from Liverpool.
Still the Lightning Seeds?
Might have mentioned that in the previous episode.
Don't worry, we will talk about the Lightning Seeds, I promise. They're going to be
Thank you.
I'm very excited. Let's be honest, it has been a bit slim pickings in this category for our most recent podcasts. The scores have not been high, but I think Liverpool is going to impress people.
Absolutely. All right, let's get on with it then. Let's get straight into it. The Beatles, Merseybeat. Tell us about this.
Well, we don't need to tell anyone the Beatles were from Liverpool or how phenomenally successful they were. What we want to focus on is the Merseybeat musical style, which characterised the Beatles' early sound and how this evolved in Liverpool. And it was an early rock and roll style. It merged British and American influences, American styles like rock and roll and blues, British skiffle and music hall. But, Liam, you're the big Merseybeat fan. Why don't you tell us what Merseybeat is, what characterises it?
The influences you've mentioned are rock and roll, there's skiffle, which is like folkier. But I think what sets it apart is the interplay of the instruments on the beat. So it's a straightforward beat. It's 4/4 time, but the instruments play on different beats in the 4/4. So this is an experiment for the podcast. We've never done anything like this before. Okay,
live
so
performance incoming.
Just bear with us. But okay, I'm going to just tap. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to put on the second beat. We're going to put another beat, and then so we've got a backbeat there. So we've got 2 instruments, and then sometimes they put a double backbeat on like this. That's the double backbeat you hear on Please Please Me, for example, off their first album, or on I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was Bob Dylan's favourite, that driving beat. And it would be the guitars playing on the beat or the backbeat, giving rise to an interplay between the rhythm guitar, the lead guitar, bass guitar, the drum, and it was that interplay that gave it that energetic sound. Sometimes it would be a simple chord on the beat or the backbeat, and the Mersey bands often sang with close vocal harmony. So that's my rather amateurish attempt at explaining what Merseybeat is. I mean, the best thing to do is to listen to the Beatles, of course, or someone can give a better explanation. Perhaps one of our listeners that's an expert in music can tell us. Ringo Starr. Ringo, if you're listening.
No, Ringo Starr doesn't respond to messages anymore.
Does he not? He might be listening.
Jim, he had a bit of a public tantrum about 20 years ago.
Okay.
Recorded it.
Wait, well, I happen to know if George Harrison had still been alive, he would have been listening because his first love was architecture before music. Did you know that?
I did not.
He was fascinated by buildings all his life. He loved buildings. And Liverpool must have seen all those wonderful buildings. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. We're talking about Merseybeat, and this was really exciting music for young people. It was different. So why did this happen in Liverpool?
One major theory is because again, of that multiculturalism aspect, that because of the port's linked with America, giving access to American cultural imports like records and instruments, which merged with these skiffle and jazz sounds, which were common in the city in the 1950s. The Cavern Club, the famous club where the Beatles famously performed many of their early concerts, was originally a jazz club, not a rock and roll or a Merseybeat club. American acts performed in Liverpool as well. There was a famous performance by Buddy Holly at the Philharmonic Hall in 1958. It's been suggested that the organisers may not have known that he was a rock and roll act, but he got through anyway. It's also been proposed that the high levels of post-war unemployment in Liverpool led to a load of young people with basically time on their hands, a drive to earn money and achieve something with their lives through music. But Merseybeat may also have been influenced to an extent by sea shanties. Maggie May, for instance, I know it's a song that you're very keen on, was a song about Liverpool, which the Beatles sang. The Merseybeat sound was hugely popular until the mid-1960s. About a fifth of all top 10 songs on the UK charts in 1964 were by Merseybeat performers. Across the decade as a whole, there were 32 number one songs by Liverpool performers, so it really was a massive centre of popular music in the country. It did fall away though. Bands like the Beatles moved on to other sounds like psychedelia, harder sounding rock music started to take over, and it perhaps just started to sound a bit like old hat after a while, but nevertheless, it still lives long in people's consciousness. There today, it has many, many fans, even in this day and age.
Well, that's it. I mean, they all got into like psychedelic rock, prog rock. But I want to clarify, I'm not a fan of Maggie May. I like the Beatles.
I've definitely heard you sing that song before.
It's one of their worst songs. It's quite a late one as well, isn't it? Was it Let It Be, White Album? Quite late on. So that's less Merseybeat era, but absolutely a sea shanty. So absolutely huge. And we got various theories. So of course, that link that you mentioned with America. And in those days, the scarcity of luxury goods in Britain. So I read a biography of George Harrison, and when Buddy Holly came to Britain, they were looking at his guitar and they were just amazed by this incredible guitar, which didn't have many of those kind of things in Britain. And the records came over with the Cunard Yanks. George Harrison's dad has worked for a liner. Now that name Merseybeat, that became the name of an influential magazine in Liverpool. It was founded by a guy called Bill Harry, who was a classmate of John Lennon, and he counted 300 bands in Liverpool in 1962. He actually made a poll of the most popular bands at the time. It's really good. It's a really good historical record. The Beatles finished top of that poll. Jerry and the Pacemakers was up there as well. But some of the other bands that were on there, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, Johnny Sandon and the Searchers, Kingside Taylor and the Dominoes. The Searchers were hugely influential. That's actually another feature of Merseybeat, vocal harmonies, which the Beatles are so well known for, and the Searchers, and a lot of those bands, and even just the Scouse accent, the sound.
Should we focus on the Beatles a little bit more? Before the Beatles were formed, John Lennon played in a Liverpool skiffle group, the Quarrymen. First met Paul McCartney when he was 16, playing in a gig at the 1957 St. Peter's Church Fete. Paul McCartney started playing Eddie Cochran backstage, John recalled later, and John invited him to join the Quarrymen. They played at the Cavern Club the next month, plus other local venues like the Casbah Coffee Club. This included their first gig under the name of the Beatles in the Jacaranda Club in Liverpool, which is still going. After their famous time in Hamburg, the Beatles played one of their first concerts back at Liverland Town Hall Ballroom, just to the north of Liverpool. The local DJ, Bob Wooler, pinpoints this concert where the audience, in his words, went mad as the start of Beatlemania. So, yeah, Liverpool wasn't just where they were from. Liverpool was really where they honed their craft and started to become the musicians and the band they were.
You've mentioned the Cavern Club a lot. There's a Cavern Club in Liverpool today. You can visit it. It's not the same location, but it's trying to evoke some of the atmosphere of the Cavern Club. Let's talk a bit more about the Cavern Club as a venue.
Yeah, the Cavern Club, I expect most listeners would have heard of it. It was a famous hub of Merseybeat where the Beatles, other bands performed. It was originally, as we mentioned, a jazz club based on one in Paris called Le Caveau. It opened in 1957. There was major excitement. 2,000 people queued up. Only 600 got in. It hosted mainly jazz music at first, but also one skiffle band on the first night, according to a report in a local paper. The Quarrymen played their first concert there just a month after Paul McCartney and John Lennon first met at that church fete. The drummer of the band, not at this point Ringo Starr, said they added some rock and roll songs to their skiffle repertoire and were passed the note telling them to stop playing rock and roll. So clearly they weren't ready for that major leap at that point. Jazz eventually gave way, though, and the club has had its first all-beat night in 1960. What's there today? As you've said, the Cavern Club, even though they do charge you to get in, is not the original Cavern Club. That closed in the 1970s. So the original door is still visible. A new one opened in the 1980s. While it does cover some of the same area as the original club, has a different layout and a different stage. But it's, even though if it's not the same club, it's still going to be an important place to visit if you are a fan of Liverpool music.
I think so. I think if you like the Beatles and you like a drink, there is always someone there playing Beatles songs. I've been a few times. I was there with my mum once, and everyone sings, right? Everyone's singing along to the Beatles. And there's a guy playing guitar, or a couple of guys playing guitar. And the guy playing the guitar said, my mum was the only one who knew the lyrics to the second verse of Yellow Submarine.
Not sure I know the lyrics to that.
No, everyone knows the first verse, but not the second verse.
Being born in the town where I was born. That's
Yellow Submarine, one of those songs you hear on the football terraces as well. One of you see, not many bands have that cut through.
Yeah,
that's why they're so massive. But yes, I've spent a lot of time in the Cavern Club. It's very nice if you like the Beatles. I had a few hours there with my friend Halima last year, and we did get him for free because we were so charming.
No,
let us in for free.
There are plenty of other pubs and bars on that road, though. So if you don't want to pay to get into the Cavern Club, you can go to the Cavern Pub, I think.
And with music, that's something to say, like, about the legacy this leaves on the city today. Should we talk a bit about what this means for the city today? Because I think this is a good link.
Yeah, by all means.
That area around the Cavern Club, Matthew Street, is just a collection of bars, and there's music all the time. And this is one of the things about Liverpool. There's always music playing. And, of all different scales, bands or just individuals playing guitars. It's constant, particularly that area of Matthew Street, but also rope walks. And Matthew Street's got the statues. It's just an amazing area, and that's sort of what's left. But more broadly, I suppose, across the city, you can't get away from the Beatles. You can go on a Beatles tour and see, where they grew up. 2 of their houses are National Trust homes.
Somewhere I'm going to take you next year, Liam, next season, when Ipswich play at Anfield, there's a pub near the away end, which I went into called Epstein's, because Brian Epstein's father, Beatles manager, he lived there. It's full of Beatles memorabilia, and very reasonably priced.
Do you know what I love about it as well? When you do the Beatles stuff, it gives you that sense of the history of post-war Britain, because the homes they grew up in. So you visit George Harrison's house where he first grew up, which isn't a National Trust property. It's just a little end of terrace. They lived in what we would consider now to be terrible housing. No indoor bathroom, outdoor toilet, bathing in a metal bath by the fire, and they got moved to more modern housing in Speke. And in the first episode last week, you spoke about the ideology of housing, people being moved, and that family found that although they had a much nicer house, they'd been uprooted from their community and there was more crime. So the history of the Beatles, you go around, you do the tours, you go to Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields, all these places, and you do get a sense of the history of the city at that time. So it's a really cool link. So you can't avoid it. If you visit Liverpool, you've got to do a Beatles tour.
Yeah, it is everywhere. Should we move on for the Beatles? Should we talk about post Merseybeat? Because Liverpool's music heritage, it doesn't stop there. The British Council talks a lot about the music culture of Liverpool. And it says that from the 1970s onwards, there isn't really one single scene like Merseybeat that characterises Liverpool's music, but more just a collection of different groups. So you have one of my favourites, as I mentioned last week, Flock of Seagulls, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Dead or Alive, another brilliant band, Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, Echo and the Bunnymen, even Sonia, who came second in the Eurovision Song Contest, the first one I remember, and hit number 1 with a different song. Big in Japan, famous band, had several members who went on to other bands.
That's it, yeah.
Bill Drummond.
They were the source. Yeah.
KLF, Holly Johnson, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Budgie of Siouxsie and the Banshees, and your favourite, Ian Brody, the Lightning Seeds.
I mean, the Lightning Seeds are the culmination of all this fantastic music. I mean, yeah, but those other bands, I mean, they're incredible bands. Echo and the Bunnymen. And I don't want to do down other cities, but the last episode, Southampton, we really struggled. We had Artful Dodger, Craig David, and that was it under music. And here, you've just any of those bands you've mentioned. Dodgy, Frankie Goes to Hollywood. We'd be talking about them in a normal episode as like a big part of the cultural element of the podcast. But there's just so many bands. But yes, no, Lightning Seeds. Do you know how they got their name?
No.
Well, I don't know if this is true. So if Ian Brody, if you're listening, if you could confirm this song. But if you listen to the Prince song, Raspberry Beret, that has the lyric, thunder drowns out what the lightning sees. Ian Brody misheard that as lightning seeds. Ian Brody, if you're listening, please confirm if that story is true.
No, I do like Raspberry Beret. I'll have to listen to that tomorrow. So yeah,
but even in the 90s, there was more in the 90s. The Lars, the Boo Radleys, Cast, the Coral, the Wombats.
Lots of landfill indie there.
A little bit of landfill indie, and also some dreadful music. Atomic Kitten, Sugar Babes.
No, we need to be positive. Come on, these are
no, yeah, sorry,
these are adequate groups.
Good groups. And Mel C was in the Spice Girls. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been positive about the Beatles.
Has left a huge musical legacy. I mentioned all those pubs and bars where you can hear music, but there's also the Matthew Street Festival, which I've been to a number of years back. One of the best British street festivals. It's one of the world's musical cities. I think it's a UNESCO City of Music, am I right? Given all that we've said, is there a unifying factor to the post Merseybeat Liverpool music?
I suppose that there's one important venue, the Club Eric's. Many bands played their first gigs there, which opened in the 1970s. Thematically, one BBC local radio presenter tried to characterise the Liverpool sound. He said it's the sound of grief, of the loss of people, an industry, and of the city's soul. So you have those factors going into it. Nothing as clear as one musical style, musical type. Yeah. But whether you see the sound as unified, diverse, or both, it's all covered in the Museum of Liverpool. I should mention the exhibitions there. They don't just start them with the Beatles. They cover all manner of popular music that's arisen in Liverpool. So definitely worth going there if that's something that interests you.
There's more music beyond popular music. There's older music if you go back.
Yeah, going back in time a bit. Liverpool's musical heritage definitely doesn't just start with Merseybeat. Lita Rosa was from Liverpool. Her father performed music in the city. She started performing as a dancer in Merseyside, and she's notable as the first British woman to get to number one in the UK charts in 1953 with a song you'll know, How Much Is That Doggy in the Window? She hated the song. She never performed it, but her recording was Margaret Thatcher's favourite song. There's also a section about her in the Liverpool Museum you can see as well.
Not popular in Liverpool.
No, it probably wouldn't be. But also Frankie Vaughan, Michael Holiday, Billy Fury, also all hit number one before the emergence of Merseybeat. I think there's a statue of Billy Fury at the docks now in Liverpool. But as well as popular music, one other quick point, just I think to round off music, the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic is the oldest surviving professional symphony orchestra in the world. The key point here is professional. It turned professional in 1853. Other orchestras which weren't professional at that time are much older, but still it's a noteworthy event in Liverpool's musical heritage.
That's a huge amount on music, and it's always, as we say, Ye Olde Guide, we give you an idea of where you can go to sort of see these historical legacies. And I mean, we've mentioned the Cavern Club. I think there's a music on the site of Eric's. It's obviously gone through reincarnations. There's numerous tours you can do to see the outerlying areas of the city associated with the Beatles, which I would recommend. So we talked a lot about music. Let's talk now about the other real big hitting cultural export, which is the two football clubs. And you said, I seem to remember you somewhat controversially, if you don't mind me saying so, suggested Liverpool might be the most successful football city in England. But do you want to give us a bit of a reason why you think that?
Yeah, I think I've looked at. I think the Manchester clubs have slightly more league titles between them, but Liverpool's two football clubs, Liverpool and Everton, they have 60 major honours between them, so it's almost unparalleled. Liverpool would probably be considered the more successful, in part because of their 19 title wins against Everton's 9, and also because of their European successes. They've won 6 European Cups, which is the highest total of any club in Europe. Everton could perhaps be considered a bit unlucky in that respect, as their modern period of title wins in the 1980s coincided with English clubs being banned from Europe, at a time when, before then, English champions were winning the European Cup almost every season. The clubs haven't quite met these standards in recent years. Liverpool have 1 league title in 30 years, while Everton have gone longer than any other English team without winning a major trophy or promotion. 1995 was their last winning the FA Cup. Until very recently, Ipswich was second in that list. Happy to be off that now. That's really, though, as much a factor of the fact that Everton have managed to narrowly escape relegation so many times. So they haven't needed to win a promotion as much as their lack of success in winning leagues or in cup competitions. To go into the history of the two clubs, Everton are the older. They were founded as St Domingo's FC by a minister of a Methodist chapel, and they originally played at Liverpool's current stadium, Anfield. They moved out to their current ground, Goodison Park, in 1892 over a rent dispute. The landowner of Anfield created Liverpool's FC to play at the ground, where they remain. Anfield is famous for its cop stand, named like several other stands of the time after the 1900 Battle of Spion Kop during the Boer War, the Spion Kop being a lookout hill. Goodison Park is an amazing stadium. As I said last episode in part 1, it's like a museum piece. It's got 2 large stands designed by the influential stadium architect Archibald Leach, and it has another that's really completely unique, with a large top balcony overhanging the lower 2 tiers of the stand. There's no question it has become dated by modern standards. It's plastered all over the exterior with pretty cheap looking cladding, which does the aesthetics no favours and blocks off the famous view of St Luke's Church in the corner. But the club are moving out to a new stadium soon, so really, I know you haven't been there, Liam, need to get there while you can. Meanwhile, Anfield has been really thoroughly modernised over the last few years and is a really impressive stadium. It was the site of a famous 1960s Panorama documentary that filmed the cops singing, spoke of the links between football culture and Liverpool's Merseybeat music culture of the time. It's very hard to get tickets for matches. Everton sometimes go on general sale. Liverpool, it's basically impossible to get tickets for a competitive game without a membership or without going in the away end. You might prefer to just do a tour of the stadium, as in perhaps go in the away end if you can manage and qualify for that. If you get the opportunity to go to either, definitely places to go for football fans.
Both teams have their ground located in quite densely packed Victorian terraced regions, and the kind of housing there is typical of the housing in Liverpool of that era. Really densely packed, and the football grounds are stuck in there, and then there's the park in between them. But so they're both a bit out of town, but worth a visit. And I think the stadium tour is a great idea. Everton are moving down to Bramley-Moore Dock towards the Irish Sea. If you go along that way, there's a huge area of pretty much abandoned docks, and the new stadium is being built there. Not without controversy. It's contributed to the loss of UNESCO World Heritage status, but we'll talk about that in the urban landscape.
One thing I'll add, actually, you mentioned the Victorian terraced housing, absolutely right around the grounds. Liverpool have bought up a lot of the terraced housing that completely surrounds the ground in recent years for stadium expansion. But one interesting little remnant is the Albert Pub. The Albert Pub is a Victorian terraced pub, which stands on its own now, but it's still there right behind the Kop. You can still go there on a match day. It's very, very busy, as you'd expect, but I've been lucky enough to go in there on one of my visits. It really sticks out as being kind of this traditional pub, a bit incongruous next to its neighbour, but all the better for it.
A lot of old football grounds were like that, and sometimes you lose some of that heritage when stadia move. Football's not the only big deal in Liverpool. It's famous as well for horse racing.
Yep, we have to mention Aintree. This is the racecourse just on the outskirts of Liverpool, which is home to one of the most famous horse races, certainly in this country, probably the world, the Grand National. It's a steeplechase race, which means the horses have to jump over fences and ditches. It's been run since the 1830s. It's watched by about 500 million people each year by latest statistics. It is notoriously difficult. You get lots of horses that fail to complete the course. Some of the fences have been made lower and some of the ditches less deep in recent years to make it a bit less dangerous because there were so many fatalities happening amongst the horses. And it does seem to be the only time of the year when lots of people get at all interested in horse racing or gambling. Do you do a sweepstake at work? Is that still a thing that people do?
It's the only race where that happens.
The famous races there, Red Rum very famously won the 3 Grand Nationals in the 1970s. He's the only horse to have won 3. He's now buried near the winning post. Devon Loch, the Queen Mother's horse, as was, collapsed in 1956, just 40 yards from victory, very famously surrendered a 5-length lead and didn't win. It's a mystery to this day as to why he collapsed, just basically a belly flop when he was approaching the winning post. But there have also been quite a lot of examples of the race not being run. A few of these you might remember. During the First World War, Aintree itself was requisitioned by the War Office. A replacement race was run at Gatwick Racecourse, which is now the site of Gatwick Airport. In 1993, one you might remember, the race was cancelled after a false start. 30 of the 39 jockeys thought the race was still going. 7 of them finished the race, so they couldn't really restart it, presumably because the horses were knackered by that point. It wouldn't be fair. But yeah, I remember that very well. It was a very big deal at the time. 1997, it was postponed due to an IRA bomb threat. Many people had to leave their cars at the racecourse overnight. In 2020, there was a virtual Grand National due to coronavirus. There was a computer simulated version using data from real horses fed in to simulate the Grand National. I think people could actually bet on it.
That's utterly bizarre.
It is, yeah. But that's what we were resorting to back then. Our children and grandchildren will never believe it. But Aintree's also hosted other events. It's hosted concerts, Michael Jackson on his Bad tour in 1988 famously, but also Formula One. This is a surprising fact. It's hosted 5 British Grand Prix between 1955 and 1962. So not just famous for horse racing.
No, and again, that's right on the edge of Liverpool, but at least it's got a train station. You can take Merseyrail out to Aintree, unlike the football grounds where it's a bit of a walk. And then let's talk a bit about sort of cultural TV heritage.
Yeah, we only have time for a brief mention of this, but important to get it in. Liverpool's Albert Dock was the home of Granada Television for many years. Do you remember their weatherman when we were young from Richard and Judy? Or was This Morning with Richard and Judy, I think of his full name. He used to have a floating weather map in the water there, and he used to just jump around the map. I think he might have fallen in once, and it was endlessly replayed on TV.
Oh, well, that was the Albert Dock.
Yep, there's the Albert Dock.
Ah, fantastic. And television, Brookside was Liverpool as well.
Yep, Brookside, soap set in Liverpool in the 80s, 90s, I think getting on to the 2000s. Doesn't run anymore, but certainly it was very popular back when we were young.
No, exactly. And just to finish off on culture, I suppose, you've mentioned the Albert Dock. The Albert Dock's host to Tate Gallery. Mm-hmm. And this was part of Michael Heseltine's vision for the Albert regeneration, and got this very famous art gallery, which is a real draw for tourists. But Liverpool is a real centre for art, and that goes right back to the 19th century. So the Walker Art Gallery, which is a fantastic building, which we'll talk about in part 4, that dates back to when the Liverpool Royal Institution acquired 37 paintings from William Roscoe, who was trying to pay off debts, and that became the gallery and eventually. And that's one of the big neoclassical buildings that you see as you come out of Lime Street Station or William Brown Street. So we'll be talking about that collection of buildings. That's the genesis of this collection, and Liverpool as a city of art, and that's expressed through the Tate Gallery today. So if you're a lover of art and you're visiting Britain, it's a good case for going to Liverpool. and visiting the Tate in those warehouses on the Albert Dock that we will have to talk quite a bit about, because they're quite significant buildings. I just want to talk, finally, just before we conclude, I just want to talk about like the personality of Liverpool, the Scousers. Everyone knows a Scouser. That word Scouse is a stew, I believe. I've never had it.
I think I have once. I used to do it in Wetherspoons, so I think I had it when I was a student.
It's a strong regional identity, and I think that's quite a cool thing. Look, different cities in the UK have reached their own identities. Liverpool's is particularly well known, I think, and that's just the culmination of all these cultural exports and the things we spoke about in our last episode, where we spoke about immigration and the cultural mix of Liverpool. I wanted to end on that, but let's now. Are you ready just to conclude a bit on arts and culture? You got any concluding remarks?
Yeah, and I suppose let's talk about what's there today. Liverpool's incredible musical heritage. It's recognised in the rebuilt Cavern Club, other live music venues we talked about, exhibitions in the Museum of Liverpool, the Beatles Museum itself, which I don't think we've mentioned yet, but that's there.
Oh, yeah.
You've got numerous guided tours, loads of different buildings claiming association with the Beatles, including that pub near the away end at Anfield, Epstein's. You can even study for an MA on the Beatles at the University of Liverpool. And this is recognised in Liverpool's designation as England's only UNESCO City of Music. And that title's really both backwards and forwards looking. It looks not just at its musical heritage, but Liverpool's experience in hosting musical festivals, in its history as a centre of music creation, its facilities and institutions dedicated to creation of music today. So the music scene in Liverpool, it's not just rooted in the past, it's continuing to evolve, produce successful modern acts while hosting large festivals, including one celebrating African and Irish music. The only reason I'm not going to give Liverpool the very top marks, which we almost never do, the 10 out of 10, is because it's excelled completely in modern popular culture. It hasn't excelled so much in more than one era. There's a description of Liverpool from 1795 as the only town in England of any preeminency that has not one single erection or endowment for the advancement of science, the cultivation of the arts, or promotion of useful knowledge. It's possibly unfair to read loads into this. Libraries and artistic institutions are opened later, but it does set the scene for this category in which we've looked mostly at modern, working class and popular culture rather than anything before, because Liverpool wasn't so significant a place. I'll be honest, I'm hovering between a 9 and a 9.5 for this.
Let me help you out then, because I'm going to give it a 10. And
fair enough.
The reason being, music is such an important part of this category, and there's not many cities that you can think of globally that compete for Western music. I'm talking about, and I'm sorry, the podcast, I only have knowledge really of Western music. But if you're thinking about cities that really have been the epicenters of Western music, Liverpool's up there. It's up there with Chicago, New York. Within Britain, I think a comparison with Birmingham's really interesting, because arguably Birmingham's had as much of an impact on music as Liverpool, but you don't really get as much of a sense of it when you're in Birmingham. Heavy metal is as important, but there's just not the same sense that it's there, and maybe that will change. I know one of the key venues for heavy metal has been listed recently. Maybe more will be made of it. But Liverpool not only was this important, but it's also celebrating it all the time. It's an integral part of its offer, and it's part of your visit when you go, and it's also embedded in its live music today. I can't think of a city in the UK where there's just so much music. I'm drawing the connection between that history that's come from the immigration, that's come from the port city, that's come from all this cultural mixing, through these waves of musical innovation to what we have today. And to me it's exciting. I don't think you're going to top it. So for me, it's going to be a 10.
Yeah, I suppose you make a good point that music of Birmingham, music of other places is influential, but you don't, for example, have a Black Sabbath museum in Birmingham or anything on those lines. You don't get tribute acts to heavy metal playing every night in Birmingham, as prominently at least as you do in Liverpool. So the celebration today, definitely important. All right, absolutely. I'm going to go 9.5. I think
9.5. I mean, 9. 9 would have been fine. But 9.
I want to give myself some room for escalation, just because you could have that magic city that does it in multiple eras. So I'm going to go 9.5, room for escalation, but that's still 19.5 out of 20.
You don't want to commit to the top.
Is that the highest score we've ever had in a category? It's got to be close. Well, of course.
I assume Cambridge did quite well for science.
I think it did.
Well, our next episode is going to be on science and industry. So lots of discussion about the docks, and we promise not to talk about football.
Yeah, it's done. It's gone.
Thank you, and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Please get in touch with any suggestions, additions, or thoughts on this episode via our website, yeoldeguide.com, or you can contact us on X, formerly Twitter, at yeoldeguide. Coming up next is part 3 of our Liverpool mini-series, Science and Industry, where we will be discussing the enormous legacy of the dock system of Liverpool, amongst other things. We hope you can join us.